You ever walk away from a conversation feeling like you just got hit by a freight train, but you can't quite explain why? Like your brain is spinning, your heart is racing, and you're doubting things you know you saw or heard. That's not just a rough talk. That's a calculated strike from someone who's mastered manipulation, a narcissist. And the worst part, they make it feel like it was your fault. They smile while they cut you down, compliment you, then criticize you in the same breath. Act like they care, but only when there's something in it for them. And every time you try to stand up for yourself, you end up feeling like the crazy one. That's not just toxic, it's psychological warfare. But here's the truth they never want you to figure out. There's a trick, a secret, one powerful shift in the way you respond that doesn't just protect you from their games. It silences them, not with screaming, not with fighting, not with revenge, with something so unexpected, so simple, it confuses their playbook and exposes everything they're trying to hide. And once you understand this secret, you'll never be controlled, manipulated, or gaslit again. Because the moment you stop reacting the way they expect you to, you win. Stay with me. Because by the end of this, you're not just going to understand how to silence a narcissist. You're going to become the kind of person no narcissist ever dares to play again. Narcissists don't just want attention, they need it like oxygen. But not just any kind of attention, they crave your emotional reactions. The highs, the lows, the anger, the tears, the frustration. To them, your emotional energy, especially the negative kind, is fuel. The more you react, the more powerful they feel. They feed on it. They study your buttons, push them slowly, then step back and watch the explosion. And then they play innocent. They twist the narrative. They act like you're the unstable one. This is their playground, and if you keep playing by their rules, you'll lose every single time. You'll be exhausted, confused, and emotionally drained, wondering how someone who says they care about you can leave you feeling so small. But here's the secret. The game only works if you keep reacting. The most dangerous weapon you have against a narcissist isn't your voice, it's your silence. Because silence is not just the absence of noise, it's the refusal to participate in their drama. It's you stepping out of their chaos and denying them the satisfaction of control. See, when you stop reacting, when you don't rise to their bait, when you choose calm over chaos, that silence is deafening to them. It makes them uncomfortable. Why? Because they don't know what to do with someone they can't manipulate. They don't know how to handle someone who refuses to give them emotional ammunition. Imagine you're in a storm. Winds are howling, lightning's flashing, thunder's shaking the ground, and right in the center is the eye. Still, calm, untouchable. That's who you become when you choose not to react. You become the eye of the storm. Now, this isn't about being passive or weak. This is about control, discipline, emotional intelligence. It's you saying, I know exactly what you're trying to do, and I'm not giving you what you want. Because the narcissist wants the performance. They want the scene. They want you screaming, defending, crying, explaining. Why? Because the more you explain, the more they twist. The more you defend yourself, the more they tear you down. They turn your reactions into proof of your instability and your silence into proof of your strength. Here's where it gets even deeper. Reacting gives away your power. Every time you lose your cool, you hand them the script. But when you respond with silence, you flip the narrative. Suddenly, they're the ones unsure. They're the ones questioning. And narcissists hate uncertainty. They hate not being in control. They hate not knowing what you're thinking, not being able to read you, not being able to push your buttons and get the usual response. Your silence forces them to confront something they've worked so hard to avoid themselves. It leaves them face to face with their own behavior without the distraction of your emotional energy to blame. That's why they get so agitated when you don't respond. That's why they escalate, because when the reaction stops, their power shrinks. But this isn't just about ignoring them for a day or walking away mid-argument. This is about training yourself to resist the urge to react. It's about rewiring your mind so you stop needing to defend yourself, so you stop being baited into every fight, so you stop explaining your truth to someone who's already decided they'll never believe it. It takes strength to hold your ground without raising your voice. It takes confidence to know your worth. It doesn't depend on convincing someone else of it. It takes wisdom to realize that peace isn't found in shouting over someone. It's found in choosing not to engage with people who thrive in chaos. When you master the art of silence, you stop playing defense and start playing offense. You're no longer a puppet on their strings. You're no longer reacting to every jab, every insult, every twisted word. You're calm, grounded, and that calmness becomes your power. Because here's what narcissists don't want you to know. Silence isn't empty. It's full of intention. It's full of boundaries. It's full of self-respect. And when you carry that kind of silence, solid, unmoved, unwavering, it speaks louder than anything you could ever say. The narcissist wants noise. Give them none. They want confusion. Give them clarity. They want chaos. Stand in your stillness and watch how quickly their power crumbles. And remember, not every fight needs a response. Not every insult deserves your attention. And not every manipulator earns the privilege of your reaction. Your silence is not a retreat. It's a declaration. It says, I see through you. It says, you can no longer control me. It says, I own my peace and I refuse to hand it over. And that silence, that quiet strength, that's the one thing that will leave a narcissist completely, utterly, and permanently powerless. If you want to break free from the grip of a narcissist, there's one thing you absolutely must master: boundaries. Not the kind you mention casually, not the kind that shift based on guilt, fear, or how much you care about someone. I'm talking about real, concrete, non-negotiable lines that protect your mind, your time, your energy, and your self-respect. Narcissists test boundaries like it's a sport. They don't just push, they probe, slowly and intentionally. At first it's subtle, a joke at your expense, a demand disguised as a request, a moment where they ignore your no like it was just a suggestion. And when you let it slide, even once, they file it away. Because to a narcissist, a weak boundary is an open door. And once that door is open, they walk in like they own the place. They'll make you feel selfish for saying no. They'll guilt trip you for having needs. They'll twist your values until you question your own reality. And if you don't enforce your boundaries, they'll keep taking until there's nothing left of you but a shell of the person you used to be. But here's the truth: a narcissist can only go as far as you allow. Their power isn't just in their manipulation, it's in your permission. That's why boundaries are so powerful, because when you set them and actually enforce them, you're not just protecting yourself, you're sending a message. You don't get to control me anymore. Setting boundaries isn't about being cruel or distant. It's about being clear. It's about deciding what is and isn't acceptable in your life and making sure your actions back that up. It's looking someone dead in the eye even if your heart is pounding and saying, I will not tolerate this. Not because you want to hurt them, but because you love yourself enough not to be hurt by them anymore. But here's the part most people get wrong. Setting the boundary is only step one. Enforcing it is where your power lives. Because narcissists don't stop when you say no once. They test you. They come back with charm. They come back with tears. They come back with anger. They push again and again, just to see if you really mean it. And when you cave even a little, they learn that your boundary is just words. But when you stand firm, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely, even when it hurts, you take your power back one decision at a time. It's not easy. Let's not pretend it is. Enforcing boundaries with a narcissist often means facing confrontation, disapproval, and emotional withdrawal. It might mean losing people you once loved. It might mean choosing peace over being liked. The peace that comes from compromise isn't peace. It's silence that grows into resentment. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to yell, but you do have to be firm, consistent, unapologetic. You can say, I don't accept being spoken to like that. Or this conversation is over when it turns disrespectful. Or I'm not available to help when I feel used or manipulated. And when they push back, you follow through. You leave. You hang up. You walk away. You don't explain. You act. Because here's what narcissists hate more than anything: consequences. They live in a world where they believe the rules don't apply to them. But when you introduce consequences, real ones, they have no idea what to do. That's how you reclaim control. And the amazing thing is, once you begin enforcing boundaries like this, your entire world shifts. You stop tolerating relationships that drain you. You stop entertaining people who only take, and you start attracting those who respect you, not just for what you give, but for who you are. Boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. You decide what comes in. You decide what stays out. You decide what's allowed and what's not. That is your right. That is your responsibility. And that is your freedom. Enforcing boundaries isn't about changing the narcissist. It's about changing you, how you show up, how you respond, how you value yourself. The narcissist might never change, but when you change your behavior, when you stop bending, when you stop over-explaining, when you stop playing peacekeeper to avoid conflict, you shift the dynamic entirely. They'll lose their grip, because someone who enforces boundaries with confidence and clarity becomes immune to manipulation. This is your moment to decide. Are you going to keep allowing the same cycles, the same gaslighting, the same emotional chaos? Or are you going to draw the line and enforce it like a warrior? Not a warrior who fights with fists or rage, but one who fights with silence, with stillness, with unwavering conviction. You don't need anyone's permission to protect your peace. You don't need anyone's approval to honor your truth. You just need to remember this: a boundary only works when you're brave enough to keep it. Arguing with a narcissist is like wrestling in the mud with someone who enjoys being dirty. You think you're going to make a point, stand up for yourself, prove them wrong, but instead you walk away more confused, more exhausted, and more frustrated than you were before. Why? Because narcissists don't argue to find truth. They argue to win. They twist, they deflect, they gaslight, and they manipulate until you're doubting the very thing you know happened. They aren't looking for clarity, they're looking for control. But here's what changes the entire game. Stop arguing. Just stop. Take yourself out of the mental ping pong match, where no matter how well you speak, no matter how calm or reasonable you are, they still find a way to make it your fault. Instead, ask questions, not to get answers, but to expose the pattern. Questions are powerful. When you ask the right ones, you don't just disarm the narcissist, you make their tactics visible. And once their game is exposed, they lose control over it. You shine light on what they desperately want to keep in the shadows. Narcissists thrive in ambiguity. They manipulate through confusion. But when you start asking direct, calm, intentional questions, it throws them off balance. Imagine this. Someone insults you in a subtle, backhanded way. Instead of reacting, you ask, "What did you mean by that?" Not with sarcasm, not with anger, just curious. That one question puts them on the spot. It forces them to either clarify or backpedal. It makes them uncomfortable because now they have to explain what was supposed to just slide under the radar. Or let's say they try to shift blame onto you for something they clearly did wrong. Instead of defending yourself, you ask, why is it so important for you to avoid responsibility in this situation? Again, not aggressively, just calmly, like a detective, uncovering the truth. Narcissists hate this because the moment you stop defending and start observing, they lose the ability to control the narrative. These questions don't need to be complicated. They just need to be direct. Why do you feel the need to always be right? Why is this conversation turning into an attack? How do you think that made me feel? Why does everything always circle back to you? What outcome are you hoping to get with that behavior? Notice something. These aren't arguments, they're spotlights. They shine on manipulation tactics like deflection, blame shifting, and emotional baiting. And narcissists hate spotlights because they're built on image. Their power lives in secrecy. When you expose their behavior through calm questioning, you crack their armor. But to pull this off, you need to be emotionally grounded. You can't ask these questions with a shaky voice, with desperation, or with the need to be validated. You ask them from a place of inner calm, from a place that says, I see you clearly now. And that clarity is terrifying to them, because the minute you're no longer confused, they're no longer in control. See, narcissists win when you're on defense, when you're explaining, apologizing, or trying to make them see your side. But the moment you become the one asking questions, you flip the script. Now they're the ones on the spot, and often they'll respond with anger, deflection, or even more manipulation because they don't know how to function when the attention isn't flattering or submissive. This is where your discipline comes in. You don't ask a question and then fall back into argument mode when they get nasty. You stay curious, you stay detached, you stay focused on the pattern, not the noise. Narcissists want to drag you into the emotion, because that's where they thrive. You win by staying in observation. The power of questions lies in their ability to shift the conversation from emotion to truth. Narcissists rely on emotional chaos to keep you confused and compliant. But when you calmly question the script, it forces them to either reveal themselves or walk away. Either way, you win. Don't expect them to admit they're wrong. Don't expect a deep revelation or a change of heart. That's not the goal. The goal is clarity. The goal is to see them for who they are and to make sure they know you see it. Because when a narcissist realizes they can't manipulate you like before, when they understand their tactics no longer work on you, their power over you begins to collapse. This isn't about changing them. This is about protecting you. It's about shifting the dynamic from one where you're constantly defending to one where you're calmly exposing. And you don't need to yell to do that. You don't need to beg or argue or cry. You need to stay centered, stay sharp, and ask the kind of questions that pierce through the act. The act only works when you believe it. When you ask the right questions, you stop playing the role they wrote for you. You become the observer, the challenger, the mirror. And narcissists can't stand a mirror that doesn't flatter them. So the next time you feel pulled into one of those twisted conversations, pause, breathe, don't explain, don't defend. Just ask a question, and then let the silence do the rest. One of the most painful things about dealing with a narcissist isn't just what they say to you, it's what you start saying to yourself because of them. Over time, their voice gets into your head. Their opinions become your doubts. Their reality becomes your prison. You start questioning everything. Your decisions, your worth, your memories, even your sanity. That's not by accident. That's by design. Narcissists are masters at pulling you into their version of reality. They twist the truth until it benefits them. They rewrite history, deny things they've said or done, and manipulate situations so that everything always points back to you as the problem. And if you stay in their world long enough, you'll start believing it. You'll start thinking you're too sensitive, too emotional, too difficult, too needy. You'll apologize for things that aren't your fault. You'll shrink to avoid conflict. You'll twist yourself into knots just to keep the peace. And in the process, you'll lose touch with who you really are. But here's the truth that breaks the cycle. Their reality is not your truth. Their perception of you is not your identity. You don't have to live inside their narrative. You don't have to accept their version of you as fact, because the most powerful thing you can do, the thing that will silence their influence, is to reclaim your identity and detach from their warped reality. Reclaiming your identity starts with remembering who you were before their voice got loud. Who were you when you still trusted yourself? What did you love, believe in, stand for? What dreams did you have before you started editing yourself to fit someone else's expectations? Narcissists don't want you asking these questions because self-awareness is dangerous to them. If you know who you are, you won't need their approval. If you're confident in your truth, you won't bend for their lies. That's why they work so hard to keep you confused and dependent. So start writing your story again, piece by piece. Take back your voice, your values, your instincts. Understand that their need to belittle you was never about you. It was always about control. It was about keeping you small so they could feel big. But you don't owe them that anymore. You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them your self-doubt. You don't owe them your identity. Detaching from their reality means you stop arguing with their lies. You stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to convince someone who only listens when it serves them. You stop needing them to agree with you, to feel validated. Because once you truly reclaim your own reality, their opinions lose their power. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop bleeding. It means you draw a line between what's yours and what's theirs. Their moods, not your responsibility. Their blame, not your burden. Their perception of you, not your truth. You can observe it without absorbing it. You can witness it without responding to it. You can even be in the same room and still be mentally and emotionally untouchable. It takes strength to detach. It takes courage to say, I no longer live in your version of reality. But that is where your healing begins. That is where your clarity returns. And that is where the narcissist starts to lose their grip. Because their power only exists in the illusion that you need them to define who you are. You don't. You never did. You are not who they say you are. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are not difficult. You are not unworthy of love, respect, or kindness. What you are is someone who has been psychologically and emotionally manipulated, but that manipulation doesn't get the final say in your story. The final say belongs to you. So take it back. Rebuild your voice, even if it shakes at first. Trust your gut, even if you were taught to ignore it. Speak your truth, even if no one claps. You're not performing anymore. You're remembering that you were whole before they broke you. Remembering that their behavior was a reflection of them, not you. Remembering that your identity was never up for negotiation, no matter how many times they tried to rewrite it. This is your time to step out of their fog and into your light. To look in the mirror and say, I know who I am, and to believe it, not because someone told you, but because you know that knowing is your armor. That clarity is your shield. That self-trust is your weapon. When you reclaim your identity and detach from their reality, you become someone a narcissist can no longer control. You become someone they cannot define, cannot destabilize, cannot diminish. And that, more than anything, silences their power. They lose access the moment you remember who you are. When you're entangled with a narcissist, whether it's a partner, a parent, a friend, or even a colleague, it's easy to believe the next conversation will change things. The next apology might be real. The next boundary might be respected. But here's the truth most people don't want to accept. Narcissists don't change because they don't see anything wrong with what they're doing. They're not looking for healing. They're looking for control. And as long as you stay engaged, you stay trapped. That's why if you want to reclaim your life, your clarity, your sanity, you have to start playing the long game. This isn't about winning one argument or teaching them a lesson. It's about stepping out of the cycle entirely. It's about cutting the emotional strings they use to pull you back in. Because narcissists don't just tie you down with cruelty. They do it with hope. Hope that they'll get better. Hope that this time will be different. Hope that if you just love harder, give more, stay patient, it'll all finally click. But it never does. Because narcissists don't want resolution. They want repetition. They want you stuck in a loop where they hurt you, charm you, confuse you, and then repeat the process all over again. You think you're fighting for the relationship. You think you're saving something meaningful. But what you're really doing is bleeding out slowly, emotionally, mentally, even physically. To truly silence a narcissist, you don't fight them head on. You don't wait for the perfect words that'll finally make them understand. You win by stepping out of the game. You win by choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, stillness over storms. And that starts by cutting the strings. What does that mean? It means you stop giving them access to your emotions. You stop defending yourself to someone who's never listening. You stop explaining your boundaries to someone who's never going to honor them. It means you stop dancing to their tune. You stop reacting to their drama. You stop letting their moods dictate your own. Whether that means going no contact, reducing interactions, or creating a firm emotional boundary, they don't get to pull you in anymore. And it's not easy. Narcissists are experts at luring you back in the moment you try to leave. They might suddenly become sweet, they might apologize, they might promise to change, or they might explode, guilt trip, insult, and rage. It's not because they've realized your worth, it's because they've realized they're losing control. And when a narcissist senses the strings are being cut, they panic. This is where you have to play the long game. You don't react to the chaos. You don't respond to the bait. You don't give in to the emotional roller coaster. You remind yourself every single day, peace is not found in them. It's found in freedom from them. Playing the long game means you choose the slow, quiet path of healing over the loud, dramatic cycle of dysfunction. It means you allow yourself to grieve, not just the person, but the illusion you held on to. The hope that they'd change. The dream of what you thought the relationship could be. You let that go. You bury it, and in its place, you start building something real. Your own peace. That peace might be lonely at first. It might be unfamiliar. You've been living in survival mode for so long, that stillness might feel uncomfortable, but it's in that stillness that you begin to hear your own voice again. You begin to remember who you were before their chaos became your normal. And the longer you stay out of the game, the more powerful you become. You stop needing to prove your worth to someone who refused to see it. You stop needing closure from someone who never intended to give it. You stop looking for validation in the same place that made you feel invisible. Every time you choose silence over reaction, detachment over engagement, boundaries over fear, you win. Every time you walk away from a conversation that was meant to trigger you, you reclaim your power. Every time you refuse to get pulled back into old patterns, you become stronger. And eventually something incredible happens. You reach a place where their opinion no longer matters, where their manipulation no longer lands, where their silence, their rage, their charm, none of it has power anymore, because the strings are cut. And once they're cut, there's nothing left to pull. That's when you win, not loudly, not with a grand confrontation, but quietly, peacefully, fully. That's when your mind stops spinning, your heart stops racing, your nights stop being filled with overthinking and regret. That's when you can breathe again, sleep again, live again. The narcissist loses not when you out-argue them, they lose when you outgrow them. When you evolve past their games, when you no longer give them space in your thoughts, your emotions, your energy. So play the long game. Not for revenge, not for approval, but for you, for your sanity, for your future. Let them wonder why you're not reacting. Let them wonder why you're not broken. Let them sit in the silence they once used as a weapon, now turned into your armor. Because nothing silences a narcissist louder than the sound of your peace. You don't have to fight loud to win. You don't need to scream, beg, or prove anything to someone committed to misunderstanding you. The most powerful move you can make isn't to shout back, it's to walk away with your dignity intact. The secret to silencing a narcissist was never about overpowering them. It was about reclaiming yourself. They thrive on your chaos. So give them your calm. They feed off your attention. So starve them with your distance. They expect your reaction. So disarm them with silence. Every boundary you enforce, every time you choose to detach, every moment you stop reacting, you rise. You return to yourself, you stop living in their narrative and step boldly into your own. That's where your power lives. That's where their control ends. And maybe they'll never understand what they lost. Maybe they'll never change. But that's not your battle anymore. You've chosen a different war. The one where you fight for your peace, your healing, your freedom. So let them talk. Let them twist. Let them do what they've always done. Because you're done dancing to their tune. You're done shrinking to fit their comfort. You're done trying to earn what you never needed to beg for. You are not their puppet. You are not their project. You are powerful. You are clear. And now you are free.